Good Monday morning. Welcome to the Scuttlebutt. I'm Rich Mellon, Trapping Inc. TV, and today we have a very special guest coming to us from Montana. We hope we're having Wi-Fi issues. The man is Dan Helterline, and he is of course a trapper, which we're very interested in. But he's had a very interesting life, another career that's not even connected to trapping, and that is as a smoke jumper. Good morning to you, Dan.
Good morning.
I want to know about smoke jumping.
Okay, smoke jumping, I guess for those who aren't familiar with it, they're an aerial delivered initial attack firefighter. So they use aircraft and parachutes to remote fires in the backcountry or fires that are difficult to access. There's no road access or ways to get engines or equipment to them. So they parachute smoke jumpers in and then paracargo equipment in behind them to help stop fires while they're small before they get really big and established. And I think there is a smoke jumper base in Canada. It's in Fort St. John's, because we've sent folks up there and then they've come down to the Missoula smoke jumper base as well.
This started when? Back in the 30s?
Yeah, I think the Earl Cooley and Rufus Robinson were the first guys to jump a fire in 1939 in Moose Creek in central Idaho.
They were brave. Lewis Creek in central Idaho. So you're talking about some pretty rugged country.
Yeah, it's typically, I mean, not always, but yeah, wilderness, just areas that are hard to reach, by roads and stuff that they want to, contain fires before they get large. So, some fires in the backcountry they let burn, because, fires are pretty good for the environment, but then some of them that, they're going to threaten resources or threaten values at risk, they'll decide to put them out, different managers of the land, and then, they call on smoke jumpers. There's a smoke jumper base in almost every state in the West and Alaska. And I said there's one in Canada also.
You raise a really good point when you talk about that some fires are good for the environment. That is lost on most people today, isn't it?
The role of fire in the ecosystem, but the woods and the has evolved around fire. It's had fire, that's how it's evolved, and it's part of the land, the health of the landscape. In a certain point, we just thought fires were detrimental, so we removed that. And I think that's a lot of reasons why we have a lot of disease and stuff in the forest. They've kind of realized that, and they're trying to go back to, letting a certain amount of fire remain on the landscape. But it's pretty political. There's a lot of people who live in the woods, so fires affect a fair amount of people. So, yeah.
You're right. I mean, they've politicized it so much that, fires are bad. Every fire is bad. And when we have these fires now, it's all climate change, right? And a lot of it is that we're just not utilizing the forest the way we used to. We've got, I know here in Canada, especially, we have a problem with pine beetle. And, it creates these dead stands of trees that are, I'm sure I don't have to tell you anything about pine beetle.
No, we have a lot of that in Montana also.
And it's just standing fuel, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, a certain amount of fire in the landscape kind of helps maintain that, reduce insect infantation and just different diseases and stuff, that are attacking the forest now because we've removed fire from a lot of the landscape.
Yeah, true enough. They never used to, pine beetles have made it into Alberta in my lifetime. I think it was back in the late 70s or the early 80s that we actually had a big wind when their hatch was going off. A big wind happened and blew them over top of the mountains. The mountains were always the separating point. They could never get across, right? And a big wind blew them over, and that's that how it all started here. But we fight fire so drastically now as compared to what we used to. We used to let it burn. And I know, as I'm a director on the Alberta Wild Sheep Federation of Alberta board, and one of the things we're trying to do is get the government to burn a little bit more. We're trying to get rid of aspen encroachment and that kind of stuff in the mountains. Because you take a look at, we found aerial plats that they're glass plats, really cool, but they're aerial photos of our mountains in the 60s. And when you take a look at the picture of them compared to today, they can replicate these pictures exactly. And today, and you see how much the aspen has crept up on the mountain and how much it's got closer to the the sheep escape areas, and the fact that, you know, it's covering over a lot of places where the sheep used to graze. So fire is very important, you know, but we've stopped all of that from happening, right?
Oh yeah, and we have the same thing down here. There's like a lot of Doug fir and different tree species that are encroaching on the traditional, you know, species over there and making the canopy thicker, and then, you know, it's more susceptible to, you know, catastrophic fire, disease, you know, et cetera.
When you jump in, of course, you got to land pretty close. I imagine that you don't want to land very far away from fire, but and you must try for a large open area or something to land in. But I mean, it must be pretty tough sometimes. There must be some hairy jumps, huh?
Yeah, sometimes you get a fire where it's pretty hard to jump close to it, but you're exactly right. You try to find a meadow or natural opening that you can, you're confident you can safely steer and land your parachute in, you know, without missing the spot or landing in the trees. And, you know, the wind and a lot of different environmental things have an effect on that. You know, if it gets too windy, you obviously can't jump because it's too hard to manipulate your parachute.
Well, you must have a lot of jumps under your belt.
I think I retired in 2005 or 2015 with probably, I was close to 400.
Wow.
That's total jumps, you know, about 150 fire jumps.
Your heart go pitter patter every time you go to do it.
Well, you got to pay attention. Yeah. You got to focus.
I guess so. I'll tell you right now, right here, right now, that if I'm in a perfectly serviceable plane, there's no way you're getting me to jump out that door.
Yeah, no, I've heard that more than once.
I'm sure you have. What was your worst jump?
Oh, I broke my hip on a jump. In about 2010 or 11, roughly. I dislocated my hip, so I had to get short hauled out, which is where they come in with a paramedic hooked to a basket under a helicopter, and then kind of pluck you off the mountainside and get you down to the hospital.
Oh, okay. And what went wrong there? Just bad landing?
I kind of flew past the jump spot. We were in a high cirque basin. And so then when I was getting close to the ground, the fall line changed and I was kind of flying into the slope. So I was the middle guy in a 3-person stick. So you don't want to turn around because you have a guy following you in behind you. So I just kind of took my knocks, and I didn't land super hard, but I hit my knee on a stump and it was enough to pop my hip out of socket.
Ow. That sounds
Yeah,
like
it was moderately uncomfortable.
Yeah. And not as uncomfortable as when you got on the ground and they pulled it back into place.
Well, they didn't do that till I got to the hospital, but yeah.
Yeah. It still involves pulling. I know that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They say, oh, this isn't going to hurt too much.
No.
What's your best story about smoke
Oh,
jumping?
I mean, I got tons of stories. One of them that comes to mind, though. So the Forest Service traditionally jumped around kind of a drag parachute. And at some point, they decided to transition into the square and the ram air parachute that the BLM currently uses and is used. So I got to be I was the second class from Missoula that went up to Alaska and trained, you know, on this new parachute system. And then after we got done with training, we got to stay up there for the fire season. And then, so we jumped a fire up by Healy Lake. Oh, it's kind of in central Alaska somewhere. But when we were circling the fire, I could see a little cabin down below it that perked my interest. So once we got on the ground, you know, once we got the fire kind of lined and contained, I wanted to hike down and check out that cabin. So I hiked down to where it was at, and when I come into the meadow, there was literally hundreds, or not hundreds, but there was wolf skulls wired in bundles all over in the trees and all over the side of the cabin. It was incredible. I took pictures of it and I have them somewhere. But I would guess over 100 wolf skulls. And then so when I got off of the fire, the other thing that really I really found interesting on that fire, I dug through the cabin. You know, the roof was caved in, it was in shambles. And I found a 1984 small Playboy calendar, and one of the centerfolds was Shannon Tweed. And she was, so that was the year I graduated from high school. So that was a big deal for me. So I took it back to camp, and most of the jumpers were younger. Maybe you know who Shannon Tweed was. And so I was calling them junior woodchucks, you know. But anyway, so I got out back to the smoke jumper base in Fairbanks, Marty Mariotto, he was on the History Channel for Mountain Men. He was a smoke jumper. So I told him about the cabin. He said, "Oh yeah, that's Paul Kirkstetter's cabin. He's one of the best wolfers in Alaska." So he said, "Go down to the Trapper Association office in town, and you can get like a living oral history of him." So I did, and it was super interesting. And he was one of those guys that went to Alaska when he was a teenager. I think he was from New Mexico or something, and then just, spent the rest of his life up there, married a native gal. I think they checked their trap lines on dog sled, but super interesting.
That is.
So that's probably one of my first stories that can segue into trapping, I guess, wolf trapping in particular.
Well, that's how you came to my attention.
So on that same fire.
Go ahead.
On that same fire, a little side note, after we were taking a break and we went down, there was like 4 or 5 of us taking a break on the Healy River, and some of the guys were kind of napping. All of a sudden I looked upstream and I noticed something had entered the river and was swimming. And when I figured out what it was a lynx. So the houndsman and me immediately jumped to my feet, and I tried cutting that thing off when it come out of the bank. I figured maybe I could pressure it to get in a tree and I can get some pictures of it. But yeah, I'm not fast enough to tree a lynx. I soon found out. So, but I got to see one pretty close. So that was pretty awesome. And there was a trap line. We could see traps hanging in trees and stuff from that old trap line there. It was pretty interesting, spot.
So he just abandoned her one year and never made her back. Was that it?
I think so. Probably old, yeah. And I don't know if somebody else had been in there trapping, but I think a lot of those Alaska guys, they just spring their traps and leave them hanging.
Yeah.
They don't pull them out and service them every year like they do down, in other trap lines that are road accessible or whatever.
Yeah, well, if they're not worried about somebody stealing them, why not leave them hang there? I would.
Yeah.
I mean, what better seasoning can you have than it hanging there, right?
Oh yeah. So yeah, we do when there was traps in different spots. So it's definitely, you could tell you're on somebody's trap line. That's pretty interesting.
That's very cool. That's very cool. I know with when you talk about lynx and about treeing a lynx and that, I have friends who they run cougar here in Alberta, and they run cougar, bobcat, bear, and lynx in BC. And they say that when you go after lynx, you just send one dog and it don't bark, because if it barks, that cat doesn't quit running. They said that they're not like a cougar or like a bobcat. They won't tree if they're being barked at.
Huh. I know they're hard to tree.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't have any knowledge of it firsthand other than that one failed attempt. Maybe I shouldn't have barked at that lynx when I was trying to get close to it. That's why he didn't tree.
Well,
I think I was letting out some barks.
Well, that's natural, right? To try and scare him, to get him up the tree. Like, and I mean, I've had a little beagle dog that put bears and cougar in that up a tree, but it wasn't. And that was years before I was talking with my buddy, and my buddy ended up. We have a mutual friend who has a trap line, and there is they got some a special acceptance or whatever from Fish and Wildlife, where they could run lynx on his trap line here in Alberta, but he had to be the one that did the shooting and the owner of the trap line, right? And I forget under what definition that this worked out, but anyway, they did that, and he didn't have a too big of a trap line, but like I think it was like 12 miles by 6 miles or something like that, and they cut 8 lynx tracks, and every one of them left his trap line without ever treeing. Yeah, they never treed. And I said, "So what did you accomplish, Luke?" And he says, "Well," he said, "I chased all the cats off my trap line."
Yeah. Well, I know the other guys that were resting down that riverbank with me, they found it pretty entertaining watching me try to chase that thing. They got some pretty good laughs out of it.
They're surprisingly fast. They look sleepy when they're wandering around in the woods and that, and or they sit there and look at you. Like, I mean, there's times when you'll drive up beside them on a snowmobile and they'll sit there and they'll look at you, and it's like, yeah, well, whatever kind of thing. And
yeah.
they're not very high stressed at all.
Uh-huh.
Where I got connected on with you was on I saw an article, and I'm going to share my screen here. If I can figure out how to share my screen, I'm going to show this article of yours right here, Evolution of a Wolf Trapper. And what struck me the most about it was you're telling the truth on the weight of the wolf. Everybody lifts a wolf and it's 200 or 300 pounds, and you weren't you weren't being BS, and you said, it's like a 95-pound wolf, which, is like the alpha. Some of them get bigger, but there's very, very few of them that'll go 120 pounds or bigger. You know what I mean? But it just struck me that you were telling the truth. That and I absolutely loved the other picture here. Just hang on.
Hey folks, Rich from Trapping Inc. TV here, and it's no secret that I'm a big fan of coffee. Our friends at Old Smokes smoke roast their coffee beans over wood fires. You have no idea how good coffee can taste until it's smoked coffee. Did you know that studies have shown that just the smell of fresh coffee can boost brain activity? Yeah, it's that good. Sandy and I have teamed up with Old Smokes Coffee to make our own Trapping Inc. coffee blend. Let me introduce you to Wolverine, an ultra dark roast coffee bean smoked over maple wood fires. This is the pure, uncut trapper's fuel that keeps us laughing and trapping all day long. If you'd like to try our special blend, you can find it at www.trappinginc.com/shop. If dark roast isn't your thing, Old Smokes has 5 different coffee roasts from light to extra dark, each roasted over a different wood for a unique flavor. Right now, you can order from their online store and use our promo code RICH, that's RICH, and get 10% off your entire order. Just go to www.oldsmokescoffee.com. That's OLE smokescoffee.com and use the promo code RICH. That is promo code RICH for 10% off your entire order. And now let's get back to today's show.
I loved the picture of your uncle's barn.
Oh, yeah.
All the fur that you have on that there. That was a good year, huh?
Yeah, it's just right up the road from where I live. So it's on Helterline Road. He was like the first of the Helterlines to get in the valley here and start homesteaded. And then his brother followed him out, which had been my great grandpa. And they kind of farmed this corner of the valley. So, and split up with their kids. There was at one time quite a few Helterline ranches, down here, but I'm kind of like the last one. Just like everybody's kind of died and or moved on, and I just have my own little ado, my own little house here on Helterline Road.
So wolves are your thing, or canines or predators? Like, obviously, it's a pretty recent thing, because when did trapping for wolves be allowed again?
I thought it was around 2011. It was kind of right about the time when I was getting ready to retire. So I kind of seen the writing on the wall. I seen at that time, the wolves were protected, and they created a tremendous amount of damage, to the elk and deer, because they were allowed to, reproduce unchecked. And when they dumped them out, they dumped them out on a pretty much an unlimited food source. So of course they expanded exponentially with, little or no competition. So I don't know, I just seen it as an opportunity, the coyotes too. We have high numbers of coyotes in certain spots. I just figured that would be my retirement hobby or my second job or whatever. So once I retired, I kind of dove headlong into that. And since I had, unlimited time to pursue it, I made it a pretty full-time endeavor.
Well, your wolves are from us in Alberta here.
So I want to thank you guys, our neighbors to the north, for that gift that keeps taking. Yeah, it's awesome.
Hey, you guys were paying us for it, and we were like, "You want them live? You're sure?" Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I can tell you, man. Those Canadians must have been laughing their ass off with this. We paid them for wolves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're a problem for us, like a huge problem for us. I mean, when you take a look at, they say in Alberta we should have about 1,600 wolves to have a balanced population. They figure right now we've got somewhere around 7,500 or 8,000. But even if you take half that number, if you take 4,000 wolves, it takes 200,000 ungulates, moose, deer, and elk. It takes 200,000 of them to supply the 30,000 ungulates it takes just to feed those 4,000 wolves. So that's not counting roadkill or hunters or anything else. Just to feed 4,000 wolves, you have to have a herd of 200,000 animals. And we've got double that. We've got double that here in Alberta. Like, I mean, we have studies all the time. They say that, a stable population is, like six wolves per 100 square kilometers. Damage starts at six wolves per 100 square kilometers. Damage to the ungulate populations and that. And we've got lots and lots of our areas that are at 11 and 12 wolves per 100 square kilometers. So we're way beyond where we should be. One thing, I followed all of that, and as the study started coming out, both the wolves going into Yellowstone and all, and was, I believe this might have been particular to the Yellowstone Valley, but it was what they did to the coyotes. Like there had been a very high population of coyotes there, and the wolves just about wiped them out. It seemed like one of those odd things where there's so much food that there really wasn't competition, but they just the territorial part of being a wolf, they just about wiped out the coyotes. They killed over 200 of them in the first 6 months.
Hmm. Yeah, they've definitely displaced the coyotes here. I wouldn't say they've wiped them out, but I mean, you still find coyotes where the wolves, are occupying their territory. But yeah, they're pretty quiet. If you hear coyotes yipping or howling, the wolves aren't around.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's overlap, but yeah, they haven't wiped them out. But I'm pretty sure they've displaced them a moderate amount. What's really happened that I've seen is they've displaced the deer and elk. So now most of the deer and elk that have survived are right down in the valleys and right in all the ag ground because it's the only refuge for them. The wolves have ate and pushed them out of the mountains. So now they're down in all the farmers' crops, tearing down fences and eating, all the crops. And that's, their last little, and they're on private property almost exclusively. So they're not totally accessible to hunters. So, I mean, that's kind of one of the big changes I've seen, with the big game.
It's fascinating. That's fascinating. So talk to me about your wolves and how you trap them out. What's your favorite sets? What do you look for? I'd like to learn about Montana wolves.
Well, when I first started, there wasn't hardly any good information out there because it was a pretty fledgling sport, or endeavor. There was information from Alaska and that, but the conditions up there are so vastly different. I found a lot of that information wasn't very relevant. They make a lot of snow sets. The snow is super dry up there. They're allowed to snare. So I kind of had to just fall back. The first year I tried, I didn't catch any, but then I went and got some instruction from Craig O'Gorman, which he's, undoubtedly one of the best predator trappers in the lower 48. And so that really upped my coyote game. And then I just started applying some of those basic coyote principles to wolf trapping. I mean, my basic two sets are a dirt hole and a flat set. You just make them on a little grander scale for wolves. And that's what I catch almost all my stuff exclusively. And I've caught a couple in snow sets, but our conditions are we have such a freeze thaw cycle here that makes snow sets unviable. You'll make a nice set when the snow is cold. The next week, the snow is warm, or we get a lot of rain in the winter. So I pretty much went to catching everything in the dirt. I started using waxed dirt, and now I've kind of started transition to waxed sand. I just found that's a little more consistent and it's easier to make. You can make it whenever. I was making my waxed dirt through solar heating, so you have the right weather window. And if you make your waxed sand in a cement mixer, if you're careful, you can make it whenever you want. So it's a little more versatile.
Right. You mentioned that understanding coyotes helped you understand wolves.
Yeah, I mean, I just use the same sets, just on a bigger scale. You got to pattern your wolves. So you have to have your sets where those wolves are going to naturally find them. It's hard to pull them off a road, pull them into a set. You got to have your stuff where they're naturally going to find it, along their travels. And, same way with coyotes. So you kind of just, you know how to read the landscape, or scouting is huge. Just trying to, figure out the wolves' travel ways, and just put your sets, so they intercept that. I had a pretty big advantage when I started wolf trapping, because I'd been a lion hunter for 25 years. So once the wolves showed up, I knew right where they were crossing habitually, 4 or 5 years before we even had a season. So I had a pretty good, layout of where I needed to have my trap line before I even, started, just from being in the woods every day lion hunting and just seeing where wolves crossed and, kind of figuring out their patterns.
Number one question I get is, where should I set traps, for this animal or that animal? And I always answer with, how well do you know your trap line? And I'm sure a lot of the people that ask the questions think it's a cop out with what I'm saying, but nothing compares to knowing exactly, because I'm sure that you've got sets for wolves, or where they cross and that aren't obvious, and that if you didn't have that time there, you wouldn't know where the wolves were using it, right?
No, that's correct. But But I know when I do seminars and give instruction or whatever, I tell people it only takes two things to catch a wolf. First, you got to have them step on your trap, and second, the trap's got to fire. Get those two things to happen, and you got them.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's a little more complicated to that, but you know, that's one of the biggest obstacles is setting in the ground, is having your traps work. So we have such a freeze thaw cycle. So I try to find my set locations where they're sheltered from the weather somewhat. So when we get big dumps of snow, they don't receive the full brunt of that. And then the ground usually doesn't have as much moisture in it, won't freeze as solid. But yeah, using that in conjunction with good wax sand, you know, and then those locations got to intersect wolf sign, you know, setting on sign's huge. If you see wolves cross a spot once, that's good. But if you see them cross there again, you know, that's probably a habitual crossing. So that's a money spot.
Yeah, exactly. So in your area, then you must be like under cover of trees a lot then, or like the sunny side of a big tree kind of thing where you know it gets less snow and doesn't freeze quite so hard.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff that's under the canopy somewhat, you know, large tree wells that just don't get all the snow, you know, and then the ground has less moisture in it. When we do get a lot of snow, deer will start using those tree wells more. So just once in a while you'll catch a deer. A lot of times they can pull out of your traps, they hit the end of the chain, and they can pop out. Not all the time, but I'd say about 75% of the time they get out. And you always know when you got a deer because your trap will be the end of the chain, nothing in it. And then I use those heavy screen pan covers. The pan cover will just be laying there untouched. Whenever you catch a canine, and if it pulls out, you will have that trap pan cover will have a bunch of bite marks in it. I think as that trap hits their foot, that's the first thing to do is start biting at their foot, and they'll just destroy that pan cover. So if I see a pan cover laying in the snow, it's got teeth marks in it, you know, as a wolf pull out.
Does that happen often?
No, pretty rare. You know, when you get, if you get your traps placed good and you got the right pan tension, almost all the time you'll make a good, you know, you strive for a good front foot catch. You can catch them by the hind foot. It's not as desirable because they can fight harder and their back foot's narrower. I stake all my stuff short. I don't use grapples very much. So it kind of removes some of the power. I got stuff with a shock spring on it. So yeah, you can catch them by a couple
let's
toes.
step back a bit there where you said that you want to target the front foot and you know, like explain the thought process that goes on how you make that happen.
Well, you just, you know, after you catch enough wolves and observe their tracks, you get kind of an innate sense of where to place your traps. Everybody asks me, how far away from your dirt hole, how far back? You know, I tell them there's no set formula. You put your trap where the wolf's going to place his foot. When I tell people, if you see wolf tracks in the wild and they're marking stuff, study them. And then never, you know, they're not always going to approach a P-post the same, but that will tell you where you need your trap placement. You know, you can make a wolf step about anywhere. It just kind of depends on, you know, your set and how, you know, if I use blocking, I use stuff that's super subtle. I don't block my stuff very heavy, but I have a pretty good sense of where a wolf's going to step. So, I mean, that's where I'll bed my trap.
That's okay. Do you have a preferred trap?
So I've tried a lot of different ones. I use almost exclusively TS85s that I personally modify. When wolf trapping first come on scene, there wasn't a lot of traps to choose from. There was the MB 750s, so everybody kind of went to those. I tried some. I didn't really care for them. They're kind of prone to freeze down. They have some trigger issues. So then I seen a TS85 in a catalog, and it looked like it had promise because it had a nice big jaw spread. So I only ordered one, and I started messing with it. And then I got a hold of Tim Saworski, the manufacturer of that trap, and he helped me with some of the modifications. And it was just kind of an evolution. And then, you know, it took me 4, 5, 6 years. I was tweaking it every year until I come up with the trap that I prefer now. There's a lot of good wolf traps out there on the market, but a lot of them are incredibly expensive, you know, over $100. So that kind of makes, in my opinion, it makes them cost prohibitive. I can get into my TS85s for about a third of that. So that's kind of what I've chose.
They're a long spring, aren't they?
No, they're coil spring. They're originally designed for beaver.
Right.
So they were corner swiveled. So I had Tim, he center swivels everything, and then I have him cut offsets in the jaws when he makes the jaws. They're 4 coils them, and then when I get them, I laminate the jaws, and then I put when you 4 coil them, it creates a bunch of torque, so the pre-jaw hikes up a bit. So I put a shim on the spring levers to kind of get that jaw back level. And then I'll put a trigger tab on the inside of the jaw that the pan latches onto, and that gets the pan lower than the jaw level, which I think is beneficial.
Hey folks, Rich here with some exciting news from trappinginc.com. We were listening when you said you wanted more clothing, and we heard you loud and clear. We've expanded our clothing line, more colors, men's, ladies, and children's sizes, more variety. Living off grid gives more time for the creative juices to flow. New humorous observations are added weekly, as well as our classic Trapping Inc. logo. We have joined forces with TeePublic. You can find our TeePublic storefront from the store page on trappinginc.com. Just go to www.trappinginc.com/shop and just scroll down to find the link for our Trapping Inc. storefront. Or you can go to teepublic.com and enter Trapping Inc. TV in the search bar at the top. Check it out. Big sales every month, and you can save up to 35%. Don't miss out. Get your favorite gear today. And now let's get back to today's show.
You sound like my buddy when he's talking about his latest hot rod that he's working on. He got all these tweaks and modifications. That's interesting. I wish you had one of those here to show us. We'll have to do this in person. I'd like to look at your traps. So one thing though, I noticed you said that yours are offset and laminated. Is that required by law, or is that a personal preference?
Personal preference, not required yet. We have some trap requirements. They're trying to go by some of that best management practices. They have to be center swiveled, 2 swivels on the chain. But I just find that, it's just like an evolution of everything. Our equipment now is better than it used to be. You try to, be as humane and offer the animals most comfort as possible. So I think, offset jaws are huge. I won't set a trap on land that doesn't have offset jaws. And the lamination, it just gives you a little more of a gripping surface on the jaw. It stiffens it up, just so you get a better catch. Because you don't want any broken bones or anything. That's what a lot of misperception is. These traps are just wicked medieval torture devices that break bones. And I go to schools quite a bit and do demos on trapping, and that's one of the first things I do is show a coyote trap, and I'll stick my hand right in it.
Yeah,
that gets a good reaction from the kids.
And I think that's an easy enough thing to explain, and I think that you can get most trappers to agree that it is, offsets and laminations are beneficial to the animal. But so many people believe, and I have those that I talk with this all the time about the fact that they're offset, that the gap is in there, that it's easier for an animal to pull out. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely not. That trap is still close, tight on their foot. You get a good catch above the pads, and they can't. I mean, I can't say they can't. It's a lot harder for them to pull out. What a government trapper told me is a lot of times if you have stuff on a grapple, they can wind it tight against a tree or something, and then they can use all the rest of their body to pull out, and they can power out. So that's kind of why I stake stuff short and avoid grapples. I'll use some grapples, but not much. And, and another thing is you don't want, I catch a few mountain lions every year. You don't want a mountain lion in a trap with a grapple that's going to be in the brush somewhere. I want that thing right in the open where I can deal with him. And the same thing, there's worry about catching grizzly bears. If you catch a grizzly bear in a trap, because we have a fair amount of them in northwest Montana, you don't want that grizzly bear going into the brush, entangling up and then waiting for you. No. So that's kind of why I'm not a huge grapple fan. They definitely have their place. A lot of the government trappers use them pretty exclusively, because once they catch a wolf, they're research trappers, I should say, not necessarily government trappers. They want that wolf to go hide in the brush, so it's in good shape, it's out of the sun. So that's that's a grapple's a good tool for that. And then they got they have access to stuff like they've got little motion detectors they can put in their trap or whatever on the grapple, that it helps them just find that wolf or whatever. But when you use snow sets, I'll use grapples because there's no way to really anchor, without a big disturbance. But
with those offset jaws too, in actual fact, your springs come up higher, and so you've actually got more pressure on those jaws. It's harder for them to be opened when that animal's foot is in there than if they weren't offset, right?
That kind of depends on how the trap's designed. where the spring levers come up to is kind of independent of the offset because there are two different spots on the jaws. But it just allows those jaws not to close tight, so you're not going to break bones, and get a twist off or whatever. So I think you're just you're gonna get better catches with offset jaws. It's just a better all around modification to your equipment.
Yeah, we have to have offset by law, or they can be rubber padded, but we're too cold for rubber, I think. I mean, and there's
Yeah.
when it's really cold, it's as bad as steel. I mean, my
Yeah.
thoughts anyway.
I've heard the same thing.
What do you how do you stake down
Earth anchors.
earth anchors? Do you
Yeah,
have a
earth
favorite?
anchors. I think it's those fox hollows, ones that are thinned. I'll use for wolves. I've tried a bunch of different ones. I'll go with about 18 inches of chain, and then I put a shock spring on them, and then 18 inches more chain up to the trap. I've had them come out rarely. Typically, it's when they've been in the ground for a long time, and we've got a bunch of rain, and I think it loosens up the ground. But that's a rarity. Most of the time, you drive those things in at the beginning of the season, then you get a little bit of a frost or a little bit of freeze layer, they will not come out.
No.
So typically what I do is at the end of wolf season, I'll roll around and I just spring all my traps, kind of cover them up a little bit. They're all GPSed. And then once the ground does thaw out, typically around April, Easter time, I just make my rounds and then use my trap puller, and those anchors come right out with no damage to any of the S links or anything. I don't lose any of them.
You talked about not making a lot of disturbance. So does that mean, do you walk on the wolf trail in there to find a spot, or how do you go about that, not making a lot of disturbance when you're making a set?
Typically, you just try to minimize it. There's a lot of people that kind of overthink the scent thing. There's absolutely no way to eliminate all your scent at a set, so I minimize it. I use knee pads mostly for my own physical relief, not so much keeps your knees from getting wet. Once in a while, I'll use a ground cloth. So I'll get in, I'll make my set, try not to move around too much. And then I think that my key thing I found is I do not go near that set ever again until I think there's something wrong with it or it makes a catch. It's probably my number one question is how often do you rebait and relure? I tell people never. I do it once, do it really good right in the beginning of the season. And then unless we get a ton of rain, sometimes I'll add some more urine to flat sets, but I'll never rebait. Those wolves have incredible noses. I've caught a ton of them at the end of the season in February and sets I've made in December with zero maintenance. And I think once that set's been in the ground for quite a while and that scent from your lure or whatever becomes more faint, I think it becomes more attractive. When you first make them, that lure is overpowering. So I think they can figure it out. They're not as curious about it. This is just kind of my own theories from personal observations, but I've caught a lot of stuff at the end of the season when I know that lure has got to be pretty faint, but they still can find stuff. I've had them dig dirt holes from the year prior. They have incredible noses.
It's more subtle, I think, and that just makes them that much more curious. But I have the same thing happen with lynx, and I used to leave my lure sticks in my pens every year, right? And so I'd last put fresh lure on it in January, and I come back through in November when we doing our martin and that, and the lynx, there'd be snow, so you'd see the lynx had gone into the pen and have pulled the stick out and chewed on it or rubbed on it or whatever. So from January to November, there'd been nothing put on that. It's not in a hole or anything, it's just on a stick. You can't even see anything that's there anymore, and yet it still has an attraction for them, right? I mean, you can't you can't fool that nose, right?
No, I've seen that a lot in wolves. So I tell people, if you're reluring and stuff a lot, you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're wasting expensive lure, and I think you're being anti-productive. But that's just kind of my personal opinion.
Well, you catch lots of wolves, so I mean, it's a good opinion to listen to. What lure do you use?
I don't have any one particular lure. I like a variety of stuff. It's just like everybody, a lot of people like different foods, so I try to have a pretty big variety. I use a lot of Andy Weiser stuff. It's probably my bread and butter. I still use a lot of O'Gorman's. There's a little bit of Craven stuff that I use. And then I'm always experimenting with different things. Different guys are coming up with different lures. I'll try them. But, I think if a wolf hasn't had a negative encounter with a certain smell, you can catch them with anything. They're pretty curious. You can catch them with mink lure, anything that's got a smell that's, you know, animal-like, they'll investigate unless they've had a negative encounter with that smell.
When you get a wolf at a set, do you reset right there again?
Absolutely. And that's the other thing why I like staking short, creates a big catch circle. That's a huge attractant, huge. And I've noticed just from seeing sign in the snow, you catch one wolf, the rest will stay around there for quite a while. I mean, depending on the hierarchy of the wolf you've caught in the pack. So something I kind of figured out from coyote trapping, I will remake that set in the middle of that catch circle, and then I will set the edge of the catch circle. And I've caught multiple doubles. I've got a picture of two wolves 6 feet apart. Come back, I caught the female in the center set and then the male on the edge of the catch circle. I've caught a wolf in a set, and I set the edge of the catch circle, caught a female. It took a month, but a month later, I caught the male on the edge of the catch circle. I've caught 5, 6 wolves in one remake. You know, they keep coming back. You know, some wolves are afraid of the catch circle, but not all of them. So I mean, it's the same exact thing applies to coyotes. You know, so I remake the catch circle, and how I figured this out, I was coyote trapping. It was extremely muddy, a lot of rain, and my catch circles were unremakeable. They were a bombed out mud hole. So I started bumping my traps out to the edge of the catch circle and just hammering them. And then, you know, I got to thinking, well, let's try that with wolves. You know, you see that, you know, wolf tracks all over around, you know, catch circles. So that's, you know, that's, I do that religiously now, as I do a remake and then always set the edge of the catch circle.
Okay, two things. One, yeah, I agree with you. It seems like when I get a lynx pen that goes hot, the more times I have to rebuild that lynx pen, the more lynx I catch. It seems like when it's active, it means it's more active. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Talk to me though about, you've got your catch circle, okay, and you'd been set here in the middle because that's right where the trail went by, or that's where the trail was closest to the tree, or whatever. Whereabouts then would you set on the edge of your catch circle?
Well, you just got to kind of look at it and find a natural pinch point. You know, if there's going to be a couple trees they're going to go through. I mean, it just really varies. You just kind of got to study it and then find a spot that's a good spot to blend a trap. And then, you know, where those wolves are going to, you know, I look for some kind of a, you know, natural blocking, like if they're going to go kind of against a tree or between a couple bushes or something, you know, when they're going around that catch circle. And then that's where I'll set. I mean, there's no textbook answer, I guess, but just like anything, you kind of study it and you get an innate kind of sense of where to put your trap.
Okay, so you're just outside of the catch circle. You're when you say the edge of the catch circle, you might be a foot or 2 feet away, depending on where something is there that's going to funnel them through the, you know, like a pair of bushes or whatever, that they'll walk through there as they're circling around. Exactly. Yep. Okay, good. I love that. That's a good deal. Do you gang set much, like, other than?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, wolves are always in a pack. I mean, not always, but you know, you get singles and doubles. But yeah, gang setting's huge. I've caught tons of doubles. I've yet to catch a triple or anything more than that, but I know guys have, you know, they've caught 3, 4, 5 in one spot. You know, if they got the right conditions, those wolves, you know, once you make one catch, the rest stick around. They don't just scatter. So the more, if you got a spot that's good for one trap, it's good for 3 or 4. So I always, and in each set, I'll put a different scent in them. You know, if I can do in dirt holes, I'll put a different bait and lure combo in each one. So everything's a little different. So, you know, they come into one, maybe they don't like it, they'll walk over a little ways, and then they found something that does perk their interest. But yeah, you can make multiple catches a lot of times when those wolves come through, if you have, you know, your gang set.
Okay, here's a scenario. I've got wolves have gone through a small pack, 5, 6, something like that, and they've got a peephole that they've a spot where they've peed, and of course they all multiple pee on it, right? And so you'd put a pee set there or a foothold set there. How far away would you put the others?
You know, it just depends. Every scenario is a little different. And you know, that pee post, that might be a spot where you would want to grapple, because you could double set it, one on, you know, the approach and the departure, and you catch one wolf and they could get the trap out of there without destroying it, and you could make a double catch doing it that way. That's one instance where I would, you know, use a grapple. But then those wolves, you just kind of got to look around and just find set locations like you would normally set. Then, I mean, there's no set equation on distancing. You just kind of look around and place stuff accordingly. You know, wherever you see good locations. I caught a male and a female. It's pretty interesting. I called this male in January. my gun that I was using, it was an extra gun. I hadn't checked the zero on it. I called him in with my voice and he come right in on a string, and I didn't kill him. I shot at him 3 times, but I seen where I had hit him just from a little blood in the snow, but I was just sick with myself because I probably had wolf fever. That thing come in on a string, big old gray male. And then, yeah, I didn't kill him. So I was pretty hard on myself driving home. But I caught him and a black female 3 weeks later in a double, in a gang set area. I caught the female, I think, the one day, and he stayed around there for a whole day just looking at the tracks. And he finally found one of my sets, and it was 150 yards away, but I ended up catching him. I didn't realize at the time it was the same wolf. But when I got home and skinned him, yeah, he had a 22. I shot him with a 22 250, but he had a pass-through bullet wound in his hip. It didn't hit any bone or anything. So I tell everybody, well, I guess I'm a better trapper than their marksman. I'm okay with that.
People ask me what gun I carry, and I very seldom carry a gun because if I see a lynx or coyote or wolf or whatever, I just figure that I'll have them show up in a trap, and I won't have a hole or blood to deal with. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. I always have my dispatch gun. That's that little fold-up Chiappa Little Badger. That thing's great. It's a 22 mag.
Yeah.
So I have that with me at all the times, but I don't carry like a rifle, scoped rifle or anything.
Right. When
Hey folks, Rich from Trapping Inc. TV here, and it's no secret that I'm a big fan of coffee. Our friends at Old Smokes smoke roast their coffee beans over wood fires. You have no idea how good coffee can taste until it's smoked coffee. Did you know that studies have shown that just the smell of fresh coffee can boost brain activity? Yeah, it's that good. Sandy and I have teamed up with Old Smokes Coffee to make our own Trapping Inc. coffee blend. Let me introduce you to Wolverine, an ultra dark roast coffee bean smoked over maple wood fires. This is the pure, uncut trapper's fuel that keeps us laughing and trapping all day long. If you'd like to try our special blend, you can find it at www.trappinginc.com/shop. If dark roast isn't your thing, Old Smokes has 5 different coffee roasts from light to extra dark, each roasted over a different wood for a unique flavor. Right now, you can order from their online store and use our promo code RICH, that's RICH, and get 10% off your entire order. Just go to www.oldsmokescoffee.com. That's OLE smokescoffee.com and use the promo code RICH. That is promo code RICH for 10% off your entire order. And now let's get back to today's show.
When you set this natural spot where they've been coming in and they made a trip and they peed, would you do all pee sets, or would you do some dirt holes around there?
You can do 1 or 2 dirt holes, because you catch one wolf and he's hanging out there. The rest are going to be in the area for a while, and they're going to stumble upon stuff. And I found dirt holes are pretty good early season, but as wolves move into breeding, they're less effective. I think the wolves just kind of ignore them because they got other stuff on their mind.
Yeah.
So then that's when different kind of flat sets are more effective, to get a territorial response out of stuff. So depending on what time of year it is would probably dictate what kind of sets I use. But I mean, I catch a lot of wolves in dirt holes, and I used to think maybe I was just catching the dumb pups, but I mean, I've caught some of my bigger wolves in a dirt hole. So, and it's almost year in, year out, 50% each flat sets, and then 50% dirt holes is what I'm catching my stuff in. So, I mean, they're a pretty valuable set.
Well, everybody understands a dirt hole and how it works. Talk about your flat set.
A flat set's just a pea post, A dirt hole, you have the dirt hole as a visual attractant. A flat set, there's typically not a visual attractant. It's all lure scent based, to get a territorial response. You can use curiosity lure. There's basically 3 types of lure. There's food lure, curiosity lure, and then, your gland or sex type lures. So, I mean, you can get them with a curiosity lure. I use one of Andy Weiser's great ones. It's called Bad Company, and it's basically rotted down rattlesnake. And so I would classify that as a curiosity lure, but that one's super effective. I mean, that works great. I think O'Gorman's has one. It's called Big Medicine or Bighorn something, but it's a rattlesnake lure also. That's a curiosity lure. You can use bones, a bone or a skull, put a little bit of lure on it, so that's a little bit of a visual attractor. But a flat set, your trap is typically blended, so you can't tell where the trap is if don't have a trained eye. To where a dirt hole, you have a big dirt pattern, you're trying to mimic where an animal is dug at something, and that's the kind of curiosity thing those wolves see where they think another animal is dug or hid something, and that's what kind of draws them into it. But that dirt hole set, if I had to use one set to catch a lot of different animals, that's what it would be. I mean, you can catch, I've caught otters in dirt hole sets. You can catch everything from skunks on up to wolves, so they're a pretty effective set.
They're all fascinating. Are you a big dirt hole or a little dirt hole guy?
Well, for wolves, you want stuff bigger, so bigger and flashy, yeah, so you can, I mean, I've used badger holes, for, just to kind of remake into a dirt hole. Those are pretty effective. I put a whole skunk down in them and then just leave a little bit of the tail exposed for a little bit of visual. But I don't know if you ever noticed, you guys, if you have badgers up there, whenever you see a fresh badger mound, almost 100% of the time there's fresh coyote tracks right on top of it. So I mean, that fresh dirt is a huge attractant.
Well, we don't have badger. We're too far north for badger, but like where my son lives and that south of us, yeah, they do. And I know exactly what you're talking about. But we have a similar situation where when you have a road gets plowed in the wintertime and a dirt lump will get rolled up on the snowplow. And then the sun comes along and hits that dirt lump and warms it up and it rolls down to the bottom of the snowplow on the edge of the road. Man, it's a dark spot, right? It's about as visual as your dirt hole, but it's this dark lump. Every coyote, every dog, everything that walks down that road goes over and pees on it.
Oh yeah.
I have a
kind of like a.
I've got a half-mile road
beach.
from my house out to the highway, and I dirt lump a coyote or two every winter.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's kind of like, I don't know, I'd call it a salient feature. It's just something that's kind of different, in their landscape that they got to check out. And of course, when they figure out it's not a threat, then they got to pee on it.
Exactly. How long is your season for wolves?
For trapping, it starts December 15th, goes through the end of February. They're trying to lengthen it because it's one of the things that's kind of prohibitive is, they allow us to trap, but it's in the worst times of the year. They've tried to lengthen it on the front end, but they're getting a lot of pushback from the fishing game because of grizzly bear bycatch. They think we're going to catch cubs and stuff, and it's going to be a threat, a danger to the public. I guess I would strongly disagree. You guys trap quite a bit up there, and I don't think you have problems catching grizzly bears. That's another thing. You stake short and stake tight, a big bear will pull out of your trap. I mean, sure, you could hold a cub, but you're not going to hold an adult bear. I mean, I catch a fair amount of black bears coyote trapping, and almost always they pull out. Once in a while you'll hold a small one, and then they're always entertaining to try to release.
Well, we overwhelmingly snare here just because of our conditions, because of winter and that kind of stuff. The traps become just, and we have a 48-hour check law and out on the big line. Well, I would have to, I would barely have time to gas up my machine to keep going around and around my trap line to meet a 48-hour law. And but I do know one person that actually snared a grizzly bear, and it was a 2-year-old cub, and he would have never held it in a wolf snare. I mean, usually they tear them apart. I mean, where he snares or where his trap line is up in the mountains. And he did snare one, but the bear panicked or whatever, and it went and managed to get itself over a branch. I guess it started to climb up a big pine tree there, and it got itself over a branch, and it just hung itself. Well, then once it slipped away from the lost its grip on the tree and that, well, then it hung itself. And he said that was pretty exciting the day he went to check, because the mom was still there, the other cub was still there, and he says, so I got out of there, and he says my heart was beating so hard. He says it took me hours before I could phone Fish and Wildlife, and so Fish and Wildlife came in, and they went in once by foot, and then they went in afterwards by helicopter and used the helicopter to chase her off and the sibling off. And they looked at it all and they said, "No, this is just one of them things. He wasn't in any trouble. He'd done nothing wrong." And they said, it's kind of like when you produce a more foolproof mouse trap, you just get a brighter mouse. And when this is one of those situations, and I mean, it killed it. Get this, because they were using kill springs, they were using 1/16 cable. Hung that I guess it was like a 230-pound cub, 2-year-old cub, hung it with using 1/16 cable. I mean, it had a kill spring on it as well. But when you think about the size of the neck on a bear and the amount of fur and everything all around it, and that, the hair, it was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, I've always tell people there's nothing that's 100% in trapping. Just when you think you got everything figured out, you'll get your lunch handed to you.
It's the same thing with hunting or whatever. Everybody says, oh, I've never missed that. You ain't just ain't hunted long enough.
Exactly.
That situation always comes up. You've turned this into a business. Oh, I guess first thing,
Yeah, somewhat.
do you have a quota?
As a quote, as far as how many wolves we can catch.
Yeah.
So we have a personal limit of 5, but they allow you to party trap. So like my daughter goes with me a lot. All they require is have everybody's party trap and have their ALS number on the trap. So, you know, I get my 5. She's tagged out quite a bit. And then I started working for an outfitter. And so I'm taking guys on these wolf trapline adventure trips, which I think they market quite a bit in Canada and Alaska. And so those guys get online and take the wolf certification course, and then all I need to do is put their tag on a trap. So when these guys are with me, they get a tag, you know, whatever wolves we catch. And that's been pretty productive. I've done that for the last 2 seasons. So I've had some great success and great, you know, stories of guys, you know, with me and, you know, getting to see wolves up close and personal. I had 2 guys last year that they said they had been on 2 Canadian hunts, sitting in blinds. They figured 280, close to 300 hours between the 2 of them in these blinds. They said one trip it was 40 below and just absolutely miserable. You know, they had to pee in a jug, keep their water under their coat, and didn't even see a wolf on any of these trips. So then they come down and went on this trapline adventure trip. And the 3rd day with the 2 of them, I caught a double. So they each got to get a wolf, you know, right, pull it together, and they were pretty dang happy.
Do they actually do the setting, or do you set before they come?
It just kind of depends. You know, most of the time stuff's set up before they get here, but if they're into, you know, if they want to set stuff, I'll let them. You know, because some guys are avid trappers, some guys just want the experience. You know, it just really kind of varies. But most of the time I set the traps, but I mean, I always give them the option. If they want to set stuff, they're more than welcome.
Okay. Who's the outfitter? Let's give your business a bump here for how people get a hold of you and how they get a hold of the outfitter.
So the outfitter, I have to work through him. I'm just a guide, so he does all the booking, you know, and he has a fantastic lodge people stay at for 6 days. And it's Cody Carr's Hunting Adventures. And I think you can get online. It's huntwithcody.com. But then I do like personal instruction in that. And then so my business is just Helterline Enterprises. But and my email is thepinepup.com@gmail. That's all lowercase, one word. And I think in that article that I sent you, I included a business card.
Yeah, that I'm going to put that up. I'll put it up online. Up on probably. I can't get it on YouTube, but I can put it up on our community and a couple other places. But just in relation with this podcast. So you do a lot of your own personal trapping, but you're doing a lot more trapping than for the outfitter.
So what we agreed on when he hit me with this proposal is I'm basically taking guys on my trap line, and I didn't want to change anything that I was doing. So in that respect, it's nothing different. I just show up and pick these guys up at the lodge, and they go out and just check the traps with me every day, you know, and then I drop them off at the end of the day, and they do that for 6 days. Some part of the line we can snowmobile into. So, I mean, it's just kind of an experience for them. So some of the guys like snowmobiling. Some of the guys I've had, they didn't care for it just because they were unused to riding a snowmobile. So I know a few guys didn't care for it, but then some guys thought it was great. So it just all depends. And I always kind of quiz them when I first pick them up, you know, what their expectations for the week are, you know, so I can try to tailor that to meet whatever they need, you know, or whatever they are wanting out of the trip.
You talk about snowmobile, and then I'm looking at your trophies behind you from Africa. Our PH from South Africa comes over here and does sports shows all the time, and of course it's in March, so usually there's lots of good snowmobiling then. And I asked him, you know, I asked this guy, his name's Guy Swart. I said, Guy, you know, what do you think of snowmobiling? He says it's the craziest thing ever. He says you get all this kit on, you know, and you know how Africans talk, it's all kit, it's not clothes or anything, but you get all this kit on, and you go driving along, and he says you're still freezing. He says then you get it stuck, and he says you got to work so hard to get it unstuck. He says all your kit goes flying off. He says I laugh to listen to him talk about it.
They're pretty entertaining.
Oh,
and the took me hunting in Zimbabwe. It was John Sharp. He's pretty well renowned over there, but yeah, thick English accent.
Yeah.
He was telling me about shooting giraffes for meat during the Bush War, for the troops. And his favorite gun was a 22-250, which I thought was kind of light for a giraffe. But he's like, oh yeah, he goes, there's a spot where you hit them right in the top of the neck. And I go, well, how's that when you shoot one? And he just says, very dramatic. They fall like a big tree. And I got to shoot a giraffe on that hunt, and he's absolutely right. It's very dramatic. It was probably the most exciting thing I've ever shot hunting, which some people have a hard time believing. But yeah, he's exactly right. Very dramatic. They fall like a big tree.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. I tell you, anybody that ever gets a chance, the opportunity, and Africa is so affordable. Like, I mean, it's freaking, it's awesome. But I get a kick out of the wherever you go in the world, the syntax in that, right? Like here we'd say, you should or you could or whatever. In Africa, it's you must.
Oh yeah. Those guys are fun to listen to. If I had the money, I'd go buffalo hunting every year. That to me was like the real deal. Watching those trackers track the buffalo and then finally getting close enough to get a shot at one. It's a pretty intense hunt. The day I shot mine, we could hear lions roaring in the distance, and we were tracking it right when the sun come up. So yeah, it's a pretty incredible experience.
Yeah. Try and explain that kind of stuff to people who don't understand the consumptive use of wild game.
Yeah.
You do a lot of seminars, like you do a lot of training.
Not a lot, with this outfitter now, he's got me booked almost solid. So I have a few free days. I'll take guys out just to do, what I call ride-alongs. And I've been doing like just one seminar a year, usually in the fall, just so I come up with the rosters. People contact me that they want to come to it or whatever. And then I'll pick a date in October or whatever, kind of before I get started, and just have like a one-day class. And then I've done lots of demos at different trapping conventions and that. But yeah, that's kind of about the brunt of it.
You actually just did something, though. You're in kind of like giving back here. You're involved in the Foundation for Wildlife Management. There's a new chapter occurring in Montana now.
Yeah, that organization started about 11 years ago, kind of right when wolves were getting reintroduced and started becoming a problem. There were some pretty concerned sportsmen over there, just seeing the devastation they were causing and trying to figure out how to help with that. So they come up with this foundation with basically it reimburses trappers for some of their expenses. You have to be a member, and then through donations, these fundraising banquets they have, you submit, depending on where the wolf was caught. They have different reimbursement areas in Idaho. If you catch a wolf in that area, you submit the amount of receipts for that reimbursement amount, plus your harvest report, and then they'll cut you a check. And so for a lot of, I started going to these banquets in Sandpoint, Idaho 5-6 years ago, and they were sold out at 600 people. It was pretty impressive. So when I talked to Justin Webb, the director, I said, how can we get you guys in Montana? We started looking into it. And the way our fishing game interpreted the law, it was illegal because they were considered a bounty. But we had a change kind of in the political regime in Montana, so to speak. We got a Republican governor. So they changed a bunch of stuff legislatively that allowed, so those guys are able to come into Montana now. So yeah, there's a couple chapters going on. We have a Sanders County chapter, and then there's a chapter up in the Flathead. And so yeah, we just had the first banquet in Montana here. It was about 2-3 weeks ago at Sanders County here in the town where I live in Plains.
Yeah, I've wanted to go down. I've done a podcast with the president from over in Idaho, and he's a wonderful guy. He's been here to Alberta. Gosh, it'd be probably 4 or 5 years ago now. He was up here. I think it's silly because it's like everything in the world today. It's a virtue signal, right? So is it a bounty or are we reimbursing? You know what I mean? It's just a word, right?
Yeah. So it's funny because I met that Morley Smith and I recognized him from your show. I seen him at the Sandpoint banquet, and he was with Robert Roman. I was like, God, that looks like that guy on Trapper Inc. I was like, there's no way it can be. So I eased over there and started talking to Robert. He said, hey, I want to introduce you to Morley Smith. I could not believe it.
Morley is a super nice guy and just the most relaxed, laid back fella. Like, I mean, oh, I can't. I'm told. Like, I mean, he had a big cat outfit, and I don't know, 50 or 60 pieces of yellow, and you know, he had a big business and everything. People tell me that he was a terrible tyrant out on the job site. I've never seen that side of him. He's just been the most laid back, accommodating, nice fellow you ever met, right?
Yeah, no, he seemed pretty nice when I just talked to him briefly in Sandpoint.
So how big is your membership now?
We had 200 and some folks a while ago, but it's steadily growing. I think nationwide, the foundation has, I think, like 4,700 people in 38 states. Most of those joined, through Idaho. And then once we started the Montana chapters, they kind of rolled over anybody, because I was a member in Idaho. They rolled everybody over that's a Montana resident, to the Montana chapter. So yeah, it's highly successful in Idaho. Now we're just kind of getting started in Montana. So I think it's going to do well. Had a ton of, we sold the banquet out, over 200 people. That's, our town's pretty small. So no, I think I'm pretty excited about it.
Oh, that's cool. I'm a member in Idaho. I believe that what they're doing is awesome. And the one thing that, as outdoorsmen, whether we're trappers or hunters or fishermen or whatever, we have to learn to vote with our checkbook. I mean, there is nothing more important than voting with our checkbook. And so I know it's in Idaho and you're in Montana, and I'm in a totally different country, but I believe what you're doing, and I like supporting you guys.
No, it's awesome.
Well, we have been at it now over an hour after the issues we had with the Wi-Fi and everything, and things have went pretty smooth since.
Awesome. No, it was fun.
So
how does a guy find this or look at it when it's up and available for public viewing?
It'll be, I think it's going to be about 3 or 4 weeks before it goes up, but I will send you a link, and it will all of Scuttlebutt is up on like on iTunes or whatever. You can,
that's what's called a Scuttlebutt.
Scuttlebutt, yeah. And there's this, you should be, I think 75 or 76 should be the number that you are. And yeah, you can go to www.trappinginc.com and go to our community page, and on our community page you'll find the Scuttlebutt podcast. We have a direct link right there. Anybody that listens to podcasts, but most people download them on their phones, so they go to iTunes or Podcast Addict or wherever, and they download them there, and so they listen to them when they're driving, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I know quite a few people that do listen to podcasts. I'm not a podcast listener myself, just because maybe I haven't tried it yet, but I'm just kind of excited to check it out. But I mean, I'd almost have to get that every one of your Trapping Inc. episodes on YouTube. I mean, it's by far my favorite trapping show. Yeah, the first 5 seasons are there, but the next 2 aren't. Season 6 and season 7 aren't going up. I've had problems with YouTube with censorship, and they made me mad. So we developed a subscription community, and that's where everything goes to now. I just heck with them. When they censor me for having my grandchildren going trapping with me, that was the end of it. That was I fully understand that. Well, they start quoting chapter and verse about, that it's the same as the same child abuse laws like pedophilia, and that is like, you just crossed the line. Yeah. Because we got to keep trapping with our kids, our grandkids, and everything else. There's nothing more important.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Yeah. Anyway, sir, I'm going to let you go, and thank you very much for joining me today.
No, thank you. Yeah, just shoot me a link when I can check it out. I'm sure some friends and stuff are wanting to see it. They're pretty excited when I told them I was going to be on here.
Yeah, you betcha. Not a problem. We'll take care of it. I'd like to thank everybody else for joining us, and maybe we'll see you down the line.